Ancestry has a large collection of United States yearbooks available to you. So there's a good chance that you could find yourself or some immediate family and your ancestors in this collection and learn a little bit more about their early life and their interests and even find a photograph. These are indexed for searching, so you will likely at some point see a few yearbook hits come up in your general searches, but you can also use the search box on the collection specific page here to search just the yearbook collection. You'll see that there are a limited number of search fields. The ones that I recommend you use would be the name and the location where they lived, because that is going to tie it to the yearbooks in a specific town. So if we do just an example search for a Robert Smith in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I'm not going to fill in the birth year just yet, because typically that's only going to be estimated based off of the yearbook publication date anyway. Obviously, yearbooks don't typically include your age or your birth date. So I typically just use a name and a location. And we can see here that we have a number of Pittsburgh area yearbook hits that come up for this generic name search from the 90s and the 80s. But they do go back into earlier parts of the 20th century as well. I recommend using the Browse This Collection feature for the yearbook collection to make sure that you're finding all of the possible yearbooks for the time period or the person that you're looking for, and to also just manually flip through that yearbook to make sure that you're not missing out on any information that wasn't indexed properly. So to start, you'll choose your state. Let's start with Pennsylvania. Then you'll get a list of cities in Pennsylvania that there are available yearbooks for. Let's start with looking at Butler. Then you'll get a list of available schools. So we can choose Butler High School. And then you'll get a list of years that are available. This is so important because not every yearbook is online, and there may be small or large gaps in what's available, both because sometimes there are books that are still under copyright, or there are books that just were not available through the organizations that were providing these images to Ancestry for digitization. So here we can see that we have a pretty good run starting in 1915. And that it ends in the 1970s, basically. And then we have two random yearbooks, one from 1986 and one from 1993. So it's good to take a look at this list of years and check the gaps before you are searching and not coming up with somebody. And then it turns out it's because they were class of 1984 in this instance. So let's pick a yearbook. Let's choose this 1943. And it will start with the very first image for the book. Typically, that's going to be your cover. We can see down here that we're looking at image 1 of 180. So there's 180 pages in this yearbook. And we can use the arrows on Ancestry to just turn the book pages one at a time, just like we were flipping through a physical book at the library, and just take a look at the material inside. So we can read the interesting dedications, we can read any descriptions of what was going on in the school year, and we can get a table of contents of what is available in this book. You can also always skip ahead by typing a number in the box down here. So if I want to jump into the center of the book, I might type 50 and hit go. And you can see now we are into the student photos. Also make sure that you are using the film strip option by clicking the little film icon here. That just allows you to browse a number of thumbnails at a time and then use the arrow buttons at the bottom next to the film strip rather than the arrows up here. to skim through the thumbnails and just browse looking. So you might say, okay, I've looked at the student photographs here. I want to look at the section for the clubs and extracurriculars. So I might just skim for pictures that look like these group photographs rather than the student photos. If I'm done with this specific yearbook, but I want to look at other years, either to get a broader picture of the entire time period that this ancestor was attending school, or if I want to outright change schools, either they moved and transferred schools during high school, they went to college, so I want to look for college yearbooks, anything like that, I can do that directly within the image viewer here. So at the top, you can see the collection name and then a path to the specific record that we're looking at. So for this 1943 yearbook, we were within Pennsylvania, City of Butler, Butler High School, 1943. So I can click on the date and choose a different year if I just want to look at a different yearbook. Perhaps I want to go a year earlier and see what they looked like and what they were involved with in 1942. Or I can outright change towns altogether. So if I want to see what's available at Slippery Rock University or Slippery Rock Normal School, Slippery Rock Teachers College, depending on which time period we're talking about, I can click on the city name, scroll down, and choose Slippery Rock as my town. Select the appropriate yearbook. So I might choose the State Teachers College. And then I can see the years that are available. So we can see we just have a selection. We don't have every year. We just have a 1930, 37. This would be an instance where I would reach out directly to the institution because they likely have a full collection in their archives. And that's going to hold true for any yearbook location that you're looking at here on Ancestry. But I might choose 1947. And now we are looking at the images for the 1947 Slippery Rock yearbook. Do keep in mind that the way that yearbooks are formatted and what they include changes depending on the era that the yearbook was produced and the size of the school. So often in earlier yearbooks and yearbooks at larger schools or larger universities, what you'll find is that the seniors get individual portraits and they often get these little written captions that include the extracurriculars and Greek organizations that they were involved in, any nicknames. So we can see Mildred here was known as Mitty. But for underclassmen, you're probably only going to find group photos. So here in this college yearbook, the juniors get a section where there are a couple of group photos like this, but not individual photographs. And we can see underneath that the students are at least labeled with first initial and last name. So these will likely come up in a search based on the last name. But you're not going to get individual close-up portraits of each student. Moving down in the underclassmen to the sophomores in this same yearbook, we can see that there's several group photographs, but no caption at all. So these students are not labeled by name in these pictures. So you're going to need to rely on being able to pick them out on site, or at least if you know that they were a student at that time, knowing that they are somewhere in these photographs. In any yearbook, make sure that you're flipping through and looking at all of the other content because you never know what interesting information you might pick up about a person. In this 1919 yearbook, there are a series of class jingles. I know these are not indexed, but if you read through them, you can often figure out who they are about. So for example, we can see that Mae Thompson says she's a quiet girl who never has much to say, but in the art of singing, she sure can reach high A. So suddenly we know that maybe she's quiet and a little shy, but she's talented in the school choir. Grace is the valedictorian and the class advisor. Someone named Irma has bright, flirty eyes. Dorothy is a sweet girl. She has many beaux, so you will always find her powdering her nose. Now, what a cute anecdote, and what a flirtatious personality we find out about this person just from this cute little stanza. So make sure you're looking through these because you never know what personal details you might find out about your ancestor. And when we're doing our family history, we want to look for these little stories and anecdotes and bits of personality that we can put into our story, because these are real people who had lives, and it isn't just a string of dates on a timeline. We can add these personal elements and get to know them more as people. We can also find some creative writing submissions. So you might find a poem or an essay in these yearbooks that were submitted by your relatives. And again, these are not indexed out, so you'll just want to skim and look. Obviously, since this one is from 1919, we're seeing a lot of references to World War I. So certainly look for interesting historical contextual clues in the writing that you're seeing and in the books. We can also find things about the athletic clubs that you see them participating in, or the extracurriculars. So we can see little write-ups about some of the student athletes here. So if your ancestor was involved in one of the sports teams, you'll want to check that out. You might find out that they were a talent on the basketball team. And then take a look at some of the silliness that's in here. So there are some student classifieds that are often inside jokes or little japes. So take a look at them and see if you can find anything out about your ancestors here. So we have somebody missing a studded hair clasp. Again, we have reference to Dorothy and her powder puff. So again, maybe they're sort of gently teasing Dorothy about how often she powders her nose. Here we have a found joke. The object of Alberta Scott's smiles has not gone, but is gone, G-O-E-N. So that might be a reference to perhaps someone's last name. So if you know this Alberta Scott, maybe that's a clue to a high school beau. So little clues we have to look into more. Here's a more modern yearbook from 1967. And again, we're seeing club photographs. In this one, it's the Senior Biology Club with a little description of the group and the activities that they participated in. So you might find your relative had an interest in biology, and you can find their photograph here. You might find some individual sports pictures and information about the team and their season, how they did. So check those extracurriculars. And then, being a more modern book, we do see the individual pictures of all classes. So you're more likely to find pictures of your underclassmen relatives in more recent books as compared to that 1919 book we were looking at where only the seniors were featured. Yearbooks are not only a resource for students. You might be surprised to find people featured in there because they were members of staff, because they were coaches or on boards, or even advertisers. So in this instance, we can see the school board members. And faculty. So we have a picture of the principal and other members of staff. And here we have staff and faculty pictures from a 1952 Slippery Rock yearbook. So be aware that you might find pictures or a description or an occupation that you weren't expecting for an ancestor because they were associated with the school in some other way. Yearbooks have historically relied on fundraising through ad space to publish. So make sure you're checking the back for advertisements. They provide interesting historical context for what was available in the community. If you have a family business, you might find an ad back there, especially if they had a student in the family at the time. They might have been willing to provide an ad. And if you are just simply doing research into businesses from a particular era, you might check the backs of yearbooks to get a feel for what was available in the community and what they were advertising.